All right, good. All right, so this is really exciting. I thank CTRL for organizing this session, this whole institute all day. It has started out with a very, for me, surprising introductory session. And I think the real takeaway from this morning was student perspectives vary on the use of various kinds of AI in classes. They have perspectives about should they be required to use these tools and where do they get training to use these tools. To me, it was very, very revealing to see so much critical thought about it. And I encourage that. I encourage students to think through what this means for them in their work. And I appreciate CTRL for having this. It's certainly not isolated. There are other communities, scholarly communities that have had debates about the use of AI as well. And so I thought that I just found it very, very interesting. So I appreciate that. We're going to go in a slightly different direction now. We're going to be a little more positive about the use of AI in the sense that there are many ways that these tools can facilitate and accelerate our research and teaching. And I think we always can continue to have a critical perspective about them. We should use them carefully. We should understand the potential dangers of them. I don't think we hear enough of that sometimes. But we're going to talk about how to use a particular approach to AI called RAG AI, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation. So I'm Derrick Cogburn. I play a number of roles here on campus. As I mentioned earlier, I have a joint appointment between SIS and COGAD. In SIS, I'm in the Department of Environment, Development, and Health. And in COGAD, I'm in the Department of Information Technology and Analytics, which has now rebranded itself and changed our name to also have AI in the department title and in our degree. I'm also the UNESCO Associate Chair in Transnational Challenges and Governance, and my focus is on the global challenges of cyberspace and internet governance and cybersecurity. I'm also the faculty co-director of the Internet Governance Lab and executive director of AU's Institute on Disability and Public Policy. I also am honored this year to serve as a CTRL faculty fellow in AI for teaching and research, and happy to share some of those strategies with you today. So some of what I'm going to talk about today really brings together all of those hats that I wear. It's very exciting for me to be able to talk about some of my own work as well, while providing you with what I hope is a useful background for moving forward. So these are 4 learning objectives that I have for our session this morning. Coming away from this, I want all participants to be able to describe the current landscape of generative AI tools. And it was so funny this morning when the students, kept saying that the students are tired of conversations on AI and so forth and so on. And you're also going to hear me talk about, AI is not new. It didn't happen this year or last year. Artificial intelligence has been around for a long time, since the mid-50s, but there have been periods in a timeline of AI. And so we want to look at what we mean by artificial intelligence and what are some of the key trends and platforms that are out there. I also want all of you as participants to be able to understand what a context window is and what we mean by context and the impact of context on the results that you get from using generative AI tools. I want you to be able to summarize what we mean by RAG AI applications. And I want you to be able to demonstrate your use of NotebookLM, which is a RAG AI tool that can be used for collaboration in research and teaching. So those are my 4 goals on my learning objectives for you this morning. So to do that, I've divided our time into 3 sections. I will first spend a little bit of time on a conceptual overview. I usually teach with a method called the EDGE method, which stands for Explain, Demonstrate, Guide, and Enable. And those students who take my classes have seen me try to go through that process where I talk about it and explain, and we can talk about theory, and we can talk about some of the practices and so forth. Then I try to demonstrate that and how it works in practice. Then I try to guide you into doing it as well. So those of you that have your computers with you and you want to practice a little bit, I'm going to show you how to do that. And then in my classes, I enable students to do that through tutorials and starter scripts and code and examples for labs. And then they work on that in their own projects as well. So this EDGE method is something that I like, and I think it's particularly suitable for these areas. So this is our plan for this morning. So let's talk first about the conceptual overview in this contemporary AI landscape. So as I said, AI is not new. Some of you have seen me use this timeline before. I think it's very useful. So when the term AI emerged in around 1955, it was called the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. So this was John McCarthy, the sort of person who coined this term of AI. And so this is where artificial intelligence came from. So we talk about AI all the time. And as I said this morning, the students were saying they're tired of these conversations around AI. But it is important. What do we mean by AI? So AI has subsets. And the first subset that is sort of encompassing AI is machine learning. And so machine learning helps us to think about how can machines learn from data without being explicitly programmed to learn. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what we mean by machine learning. Again, everything has pros and cons, so we'll talk about the good aspects of machine learning. We'll talk about some of the challenges of machine learning. And then we'll get into a deeper subset of machine learning, which is deep learning. Where you'll see we start to use neural networks and ways of reducing error in our machine learning calculations. And coming out of deep learning, we're going to start talking about what are called transformers, which are a subclass of deep learning, which is what has led to this boom in generative AI, a specific form of AI, this generative AI. So that's the timeline that we're going to look at just a little bit here. So first, in terms of machine learning. So in machine learning, essentially what we're doing is learning from data. Think about all of your experiences that you have. You bring to bear and start to have expectations or predictions of what's going to happen in a new situation. So machine learning is taking data that we already have, and it's called labeled data, so we know what the outcomes are. And we can look at the factors that predict in that data set of potential variables that can predict that outcome and what the outcome was. And so you can look to see what variables predicted the real outcome. So let me give you an example. So frequently we think about, say, loan applications or college admissions. And so you know whether or not, on a loan application, whether or not somebody with these characteristics defaulted or not. This is a given. So machine learning is not magic. It's taking data that we already have, looking at those outcomes and trying to see what variables predicted that outcome. And so now you build a model based on that data and you test it, and we'll talk about sort of how to do that, and then you can apply it to new data. Now, that's great. If you have a model that is trained on existing data and it's 89, 90% accurate, it gives you some sense of being able to predict whether or not somebody will default on a loan. Now, hence also the problems. That training data can be biased. That training data can have all kinds of problems built into it. And so the model, the predictive learning model that you're creating now has that bias and that problematic data built into it as it's now trying to predict new outcomes. So all of this, as Karan said earlier, is nuanced. It's not just thumbs up and thumbs down. It's incredibly powerful to be able to build predictive models, but it has all kinds of potential challenges, right? Now, there are two types of machine learning: unsupervised machine learning and supervised machine learning. Both of these go into the tools that we're using today. So unsupervised machine learning, unlike what I just said, unsupervised machine learning, when you build an unsupervised machine learning model, you don't know what the outcome is. You take a bit of data and you say, what is here? What kind of interesting patterns and themes are in this data? So now the model that uses clustering algorithms and various ways of looking at the data looks for interesting patterns and relationships in that data and says, here's some interesting patterns. So one of the really popular unsupervised machine learning algorithms is called LDA topic modeling, or latent dirichlet allocation, where you're able to look at a big collection of text and say, here are the key topics in this text. So you can take a huge body of text, and I know this sounds anathema, not read the text and be able to identify what topics are in the text. And you can go back later as a sanity check or to double check to see, are those, if you were to read those documents, do you still come up with the same kinds of topics? So that's an unsupervised machine learning compared to the supervised machine learning model. So the supervised machine learning model, and this is the clustering algorithms that I talked about here. So the supervised machine learning model does do exactly that. It takes our training data and it divides it into folds. And again, with supervised machine learning, we already know the outcome. We're going back in history looking at historical data and looking at what were the factors that predicted that outcome or that were related to that outcome. And then we build a model based on that. We then have a holdout set of data, and then we apply that model to the new data to see if it's still holding in terms of its predictive accuracy, and then we can put that model into practice again, back to the loan suggestion, decide if somebody gets a loan, decide if somebody gets admitted, or decide if somebody gets hired, and so forth. So this kind of predictive modeling is at the heart of artificial intelligence, and it's at the heart, as you'll see, in terms of generative AI as well. So that kind of predictive modeling, the supervised machine learning, if you looked at that one step that we talked about with building a supervised predictive learning model, kind of goes on steroids if you think about deep learning. So the deep in deep learning, how many of you have heard of deep learning before? Good, good. So the deep in deep learning is not that it's profound and thoughtful. It means the multiple layers of a neural network. So you can sort of think of this one layer as that one supervised machine learning model we just looked at. And then you have another layer that's designed to identify something slightly different. And then the next layer is designed to identify something slightly different as well. So in a deep learning model, you have multiple layers and multiple ways of identifying the thing that you're interested in. And that helps us get to these kinds of outcomes. So deep learning has, so again, it's not up or down. I don't use AI, I do use AI. Everybody in here who said that they don't use AI, every device you use is using some kind of AI now. Every search tool that you use is using some kind of AI now. So you can't say I'm for it or against it, or I use it, I don't use it. You really are using it. And so some of the things that have, that I find to be, extremely helpful for me. So I see a number of apples here. I'm an Apple guy as well, so I don't know if this holds for other operating systems. But think about your photos. How many of you take photos of friends and places and so forth, right? And how many of you have this huge photo library and you really wonder, gosh, where's that picture, of when I was at the UN last year? And so, or here, where's this picture of Anna? And so these tools you can open up a picture of Anna and you can say, this is Anna. And you can say, go into my photo library and find all the examples of Anna. And it can bring those back because it's using a predictive model to what it thinks Anna looks like in a photograph. And it can bring those back and it lets you train that model a little bit further. You can say, is this Anna or not? Yes, no, yes, no. And each time you say yes and each time you say no, it's learning from that process. It's getting better and better. So now, after it's about 89, 90% accurate, you can say, go into my whole photo library and bring me back a collection of photos that are Anna. That's helpful. That's helpful to anybody. And we can all use that and not say AI is bad or AI is good. Sure, you can go through every photo in your 10,000 photo album and look for pictures of Anna, Or you can use something like this to find those pictures of Anna. Does everybody see what I'm getting at here? Right? So these are tools to use. They're not the be-all and end-all, but they create this opportunity for us to develop insights and to learn and to gather what we need from large amounts of data. So deep learning has achieved all kinds of results for us, including image classification and the near human ability to answer questions. And this is where we get to the transformer. So if you go back to that table that I showed you here, and we looked at 2017 as the end of this process, what happened in 2017 was in Google, you had a paper that came out called Attention is All You Need. And this is where the transformer model was identified and the attention mechanism. So this is a deep learning model, just like we were looking at, that talks about how do we focus on both our inputs into this process, and we go through the model and be able to minimize our loss and pay attention to key components of our input so that we can have the kind of outputs that are close to what we would do if we were a human. If we had the kind of understanding about all of this training data, what kind of outcome would we have? So the first model was called BERT, the bidirectional encoder representation from transformers. So the T in transformers is also what the T in GPT, in ChatGPT, stands for. It's a transformer model that focuses on the inputs, which becomes your prompt, and that input first gets understood by the model. So the model spends a lot of time trying to understand what you're asking, and it transforms that in different ways, and then it goes through and tries to figure out what's the right response based on what you asked, right? So this transformer model is very powerful, and it focuses on the need for your prompt. And so when somebody said earlier that you don't need any training to use these tools and so forth, yes, they've gotten so good at being able to do what's called prompt transformation and to try to create a better prompt for you based on what you're asking and so forth. But the more you know how to prompt, and there's a field called prompt engineering, the more you understand that, the better you can get at prompting. So these transformers have created all kinds of large language models that are trained in that same way that we just talked about. Some of them are closed models. Some of them are open models. So they're available on communities like Hugging Face, where you can go and you can rank the models, you can see how good they are, and so forth. So when we think about the contemporary generative AI landscape, and so even though we just keep using the acronym AI, we're mostly talking about generative AI. That's what we've been talking about all morning so far. We can use the shorthand AI, but we really are talking about generative AI. So there are 5 areas to think about when we think about the contemporary landscape. So you want to think about what are the models. So what are the main, what are called frontier large language models? So these are only a few companies and organizations that have the, as we talked about this morning, the financial resources, the computing infrastructure to be able to build these large language models, these huge large language models that have now essentially sucked in as much open data as possible. So they won't tell you exactly what they're trained on, but essentially you're thinking about the whole internet. So all of the publicly available websites, publicly available GitHub repositories where code lives and so forth. So they're all essentially trained on similar data as they build these big frontier large language models, and they keep working on it. And some of them are open and some of them are closed. The difference being the open weight models you can download and use, usually for free. Some are small enough to use on your local computer. Others you have to have specialized infrastructure to be able to run them. The closed models you have to license or have access to those models in some way. Now, chatbots are how most of us interact with those models. So when you think of ChatGPT, ChatGPT itself is not a large language model. It is a chatbot. It is a platform to access multiple large language models. So when you go to ChatGPT, you can choose which LLM do you want to use. So OpenAI, which has developed ChatGPT, has developed multiple GPTs and multiple versions of its large language models that you can choose from. Some are better for some practices than others. So you need to know what your goals are and which LLM might be better for you to use. And it's the same thing with some of the other LLMs, some of the other chat bots or platforms like Claude or Copilot or Perplexity. All of these are platforms that let you choose which LLM to use, and then you can run your queries. So you can access these through a GUI. So how many of you know what a GUI stands for? So a graphical user interface. So that's where you have a tool where you see a nice graphical interface, and you can see things where you should put your prompts in and so forth. Or you can access them through an API. How many of you know what an API is? This is a great group, right? So API is Application Programming Interface. So that's a set of instructions and credentials that you have to be able to access some kind of data repository or computing system. So if you have API access, you can use code to be able to access those models, choose between those models, and again, use them either on your local machine or on a high-performance computer like we have here at AU as well. And then finally, this is the last part of the contemporary generative AI landscape. This is what most people thought or think that 2025 will be dominated by, and this is agentic workflows. So how many of you know what that term means? A couple of you. Good. Bless you. Salute. Agentic workflows essentially means being able to have the LLM work as an agent for you to be able to take decisions, go out and do things, and so forth. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Bless you again. So in terms of the generative AI landscape, these are some of the models to keep in mind. So these are some of the closed proprietary models. So GPT-4, so remember generalized pre-trained transformers, which started for most of us around GPT-2 or GPT-3, 3.5. Now at 4, GPT-4o, GPT-5 is on the horizon. So that's one LLM that is available through the ChatGPT interface. Gemini, developed by Google. Claude, developed by Anthropic. It has its Opus models and its Sonnet models, and then others. Those are all closed proprietary models that you can choose from, and these are all open models. So interestingly, Meta has been very much at the forefront of a lot of open models. So Llama 3 is open LLM models from Meta at different sizes. Gemma is, how Google handles it is it's got its Gemini family of models that are proprietary, and it's got its Gemma family of models that are open. So you can choose between those and many others. So all of these are the GUI type interfaces that you're familiar with. You can use these kinds of GUI tools. You can access them through API access. So this is using Positron. This is the new integrated development environment that I use in my classes. That is kind of the successor to RStudio. It's great for multilingual programming, particularly R and Python. It's a great IDE. I encourage you highly, Chelsea, to take a look at this. And so you can specify, for example, which model to use. So this is telling it to use GPT 3.5 Turbo. So you can decide things like where you can tweak the model, you can change the temperature of the model to decide if the model is going to be more predictive or give you a little bit more flexibility. So all of that can happen using these open APIs to be able to access these tools. So then we have agentic workflows. As I said, this is the key for 2025 in the landscape here. So these AI agents can plan, reason, retrieve info, and act autonomously. So initially, when we first started hearing about this, most of these were sandboxed. So you would think, if I'm going to give something autonomy, a model like this autonomy to make decisions and so forth, I want to put it in a sandboxed area where it can't sort of get out and wreak havoc. And so you would initially tell or specify which types of services or applications or programs the agent would have access to, and you could kind of watch it do its thing. So now we see them as being so powerful and so helpful at being able to conduct business on our behalf that people are opening up many of their programs and applications and data sources to these agents to actually go out and do work. So this is what we've seen on Iron Man and so forth, where you say, I'm planning a trip to San Diego, and I want to go to a baseball game, and I want to go to a play, and it's got access to your credit cards to book the tickets and so forth. And so you send it off to do those things, and it can go off and do those things for you. But more importantly, it can go off and do lots and lots of work for you. It can do research for you and so forth. So, these there are a number of platforms that let you build these agentic workflows, and that they allow multiple steps to be able to take. So LangChain, LangGraph, Crew AI, and others. So you have to decide what tools you want to use for your generative AI toolbox. So if you're interested in using these kinds of tools, you need to think about what works for you. So what kind of models do you want to use? Do you know when you want to use GPT-4o or GPT-4? Do you know when to use Claude's Sonnet versus Haiku? So now many of these platforms say you shouldn't have to make those decisions, that you should just be able to ask your question, put in your prompt, and let the platform decide which model to use. Absolutely, that's a perfectly reasonable response. But for those who want to take more agency, then you can decide to use this model or that model or another model based on what it's good for. So a model that is great at coding is not necessarily going to be the best model for writing literature or for doing multiple languages. So you should learn a little bit about those different models and decide which one you want to use. You should decide, do you want to access this only through a GUI, through one of these nice, pleasant environments, or do you want to learn how to code and get more comfortable coding so that you have more control over what you're doing, right? And then, Betsy, as we were saying earlier, many of these tools can help you with the coding as well and help you troubleshoot and so forth. If you want to use APIs, do you want to get those credentials from OpenAI or some of the other communities that are around and learn how to use those? So those are choices that you have to make. Now, in terms of future directions, a couple of things to think about where we're going in the future is multimodal RAG. So this is being able to retrieve information from not only text, but images, audio, and video. So we're going to talk about RAG in a moment, but this is sort of the next sort of where we're going on the foundation here, in the future rather. Being able to fine-tune models and have specialized knowledge domains help to refine these models. So fine-tuning a model is not trivial. Most people are not fine-tuning large language models. It takes substantial computing power, time and resources and knowledge to be able to fine-tune a model, but you can. You can take one of these big, fully trained frontier models and add to it in terms of what it knows going forward. And then you can also have these collaborative agents that can work on multiple complex research tasks. So I've talked since we introduced the idea of a transformer about prompting and how important it is to be able to prompt in this field of prompt engineering. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to tell you this is also non-trivial. So all of these platforms have gotten better. They do something called prompt transformation. So when you submit a prompt, frequently it may not be a very good prompt, And so it takes your prompt and transforms it into something that will get more out of the power of a large language model. So that's nice that it's being helpful for you. But again, you can take more control of this process the more you know about how to write a prompt and how to be good at writing a prompt. And let me just say, one key thing about writing prompts is that you're almost never going to get it right on the first try. You have to get very comfortable with the idea of iterative prompt development and writing a prompt, seeing what you get back, and pushing it again, and pushing it again, and pushing it again. I like to think of these models as a little lazy, and so they want to, and I'm being facetious, but they're expensive. Every time you're asking it a question, it's expensive, and so they're trying to get rid of you as quickly as possible. So if that simple answer answers your question, the model is thrilled, and so it can go on and do, or the platform rather, can go on and do other things. So for you to get the most out of an LLM, you have to be comfortable prompting, and you have to push it and push it and push it. So there are all kinds of things about thinking about your persona, giving it examples, whether it's one shot or multiple shot prompts where you give it examples of what you're looking for and so forth. Writing specific instructions, things like that. So lastly, I want to talk about context. So this is something that, so since everybody had lots of good hands up earlier, how many of you understand what we mean by context in terms of an LLM? Not as many, right? So this is a little bit nuanced. So with context, you can think of what the LLM knows. And you can think about this kind of like long-term memory and short-term memory. So the LLM itself knows, I'm not trying to anthropomorphize these mathematical algorithms, but it knows what it learned from its training data. We saw how you train a model, right? So it knows all of its, with this kind of input, what's the most likely predicted next output. So it knows those things based on its training data. So that's the long-term memory. And frankly, many of these models are becoming more and more similar because of what they're trained on. So the differences between these models are all kinds of other things about how the companies are tweaking these models, right? So context is more about the short-term memory. And so the context is what the LLM knows to be able to understand your prompt, and it can use that to generate the response as it completes your prompt completion. So there are all kinds of elements that can be included in the context. So previous parts of the conversation. So as you start a conversation with an LLM and you ask it a question or you submit a prompt, it gives you a response. And again, some people just stop there. But most people who know how to get the most out of these models don't stop there. They'll push back. And so the context for what the LLM is using continues to grow as that back and forth happens, okay? So all the previous messages in the conversation, any additional information that you provided in your prompt. So if you had a one-shot prompt where you ask a question and then you say, here are some examples of what I want you to look like or how the output I want you to have, how I want you to structure the output, that can all be taken into consideration in terms of the context. There are also system instructions that the platform designers can say that they want to have their system be friendly or they want to be upbeat. You can change that, but they will put into the system instructions things about how it wants to react, right? So that can all be considered part of the context as well. In addition to that are the memories. Now, how many of you knew that these chatbots are building memories about you? You knew that? Yep. You have examples? What kind of memories do you think it puts into place? Anybody want to share? What kind of memories do you think it builds? Yes. Absolutely. Yep. You can see the memories. In fact, I got prompted once to say, I've got all this information about you. Shall I create a little summary for you about you? And I said, sure, do that. And it did. And it says, would you like me to format this so it can go on your website? It's like, no, thank you. So what's in these memories? Who are you? Are you a professor that teaches data science and analytics in Python and R using positron as an IDE? You have an interest in disability policy. You teach text analytics. All these things get saved as memories about you. And so if you look at ChatGPT and you're going through every so often, it'll say memory updated. It found out something new that it wanted to remember. I'm also curious if it thinks you're a helpful person or you're a friendly person, or, but you can change this. You can give it specific instructions. Stop being so friendly to me. Stop being so supportive. Be more critical. You can change all of that. So anyway, all of this is part of the context that these LLMs can use. So the context window is considered to be the maximum amount of text that an LLM can process at once and consider in its response. That's called the context window. So all of what we just talked about is context. And so the context window is how much of that can it include, right? How much of it can it keep as you go forward? So the larger the context window, the richer the generated response can be. And the deeper the understanding, the more complex reasoning and steps that the model can take, and the breadth of the input that it can consider. So if an LLM or a platform has a larger context window, it can take bigger documents, more documents. It can remember all those memories about you. It can remember all the previous conversations. So one of the things that you want to be thinking about is, as you use a system, does it have a short or a small or narrow context window, or does it have a broader context window? So early models like GPT-3 had about 2,048 tokens. So the context window is based on tokens, which is a way to take text and break it down into smaller parts. So 2,048 tokens. That's all it could remember, right? Current models have 32,200K. Claude Sonnet has a 200K token context window. GPT-4o, 128,000 tokens. That's a lot, right? And then you can say some specialized models claim to have up to 1 million token count window, context window. That's a lot until you look at NotebookLM, which is what we're going to talk about. So NotebookLM claims to have a context window of 2 million tokens. So that's an awful lot that the LLM can hold in memory as it's answering your questions, as it's thinking about your prompt, as it's responding to you, as it's generating your response. 2 million tokens. So this can be, full documents, full books, several documents that you want to think about. So this expansive context window allows us to do all kinds of interesting things. And this is where we come to the concept of RAG AI, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So that's what RAG AI stands for. So a RAG AI system has 3 parts. It's got some retriever, some generator, a knowledge base, and then, of course, you have your prompt. So what this means is how does it retrieve data? How does it generate new knowledge? And what knowledge base does it draw from as it responds to your prompt? So NotebookLM will be able to take all of your sources, your inputs, and create a numerical representation of those documents. And it uses what are called embedding models. So it's not just searching for a particular word. It knows what the context is around that word, so that you can find many more types of responses that are relevant to your query. So NotebookLM will allow you to build this knowledge base and then retrieve from that knowledge base as you're prompting the LLM. So you're using your documents that you upload as ground truth. So you're helping to reduce the number of hallucinations that we talked about. So where we know it generates completely false, made up information. Every one of these chatbots will tell you at the bottom of it, Claude can make mistakes, double check important information, and so forth. So this kind of approach is really useful for research, education, and for personalized tutoring. And NotebookLM, which is from Google, that started as an experiment. It's a free tool. There is a NotebookLM Pro version now, and the only real limitation is the free version allows you to load 50 documents. The paid version is, they don't really say, but essentially sort of unlimited. But we know that the context window is about 2 million tokens, right? So what that means is, even though it has a limitation of 50 documents, 50 PDFs, let's say, you can stack PDFs so that it loads as one document. And so you can continue to load more documents up to that 2 million context window, which is an enormous amount of text that you can consider. And so, again, Meta just launched a version of this called NotebookLM, which is an open source version of NotebookLM, or approach to this kind of RAG AI. And for me, I always like open source when I can, because right now, Google's NotebookLM is free, except for the paid version. What if tomorrow it's not, right? And when I show this to you, if you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty amazing. And so you can start quickly to become used to having this available. And so what happens when it's not available, or you now have to pay for it? So that's another consideration. So NotebookLM came from an author, Stephen Johnson, who had written lots of novels and wanted to be able to know what he knew. And so he would keep all of his notes, all of his ebook notes and readings and so forth, and he wanted a way to be able to search that. And so I don't remember if it was he who approached Google or Google approached him, but he came to start building this kind of a system that was really focused on people who take lots and lots of notes or have lots of documents that they'd like to understand. It is multimodal in that it will accept PDFs, URLs, so web links, YouTube videos and comments, everything that's on Google naturally, so Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Spreadsheets, all of that can go in as sources into NotebookLM. Now, they tell you that these documents don't leave the notebook. So as you load these in, and I saw an eyebrow go up, just like for me too. So, they tell you load in these 50 documents, this 2 million, context window here. And we're not going to use that to fine-tune the model or train future models, right? Okay, so I only upload public documents, as you're going to see in a moment, but if you feel comfortable. And the other thing is, if you are comfortable using APIs and coding and doing it on your own computer, then you don't have to worry about what's happening with the documents that you load, because you're not loading them on the cloud, you're using them locally. But if you're using a GUI-based approach, and you're loading onto this system, this is what you have to wrestle with. So, so they're saying that you're not going to fine-tune the data. And so fine-tuning is where, as I was saying, you're permanently changing the model. And so most of us are not fine-tuning LLMs. But once you load all those sources into NotebookLM, you can auto-generate all this content. So you can auto-generate an FAQ, so frequently asked questions that it thinks you might want to know about the documents that you just loaded. You can generate a study guide. You can generate this deep dive podcast. You can, it has recommended prompts. So it's going to look at the data. It's going to summarize all the data, all the documents, and it can decide, I think you might want to ask this. So it's going to give you suggested prompts as well. So just like I said earlier that prompting doesn't go away, so even though it gives you suggested prompts, to get the most out of it, you still have to know how to prompt. You still have to know what you want to generate. And you can also export these notebooks, and you can add collaborators. So you can add collaborators for anybody that has a Gmail account. You can add them as an editor or just a viewer. So if they are a viewer, they can see what you've done. They can read the notes and so forth. But if they're an editor, they can do everything that you can do. And the good thing is that you can revoke access at any time. But if we're collaborating, you can put in the same kind of prompts and generate notes and so forth. So if you want to go even further with a GUI tool, there's another tool from Google called AI Studio. It's very similar, except it gives you, it's more overwhelming in terms of what it gives you options to do. So choosing the model. So with NotebookLM, you can't choose the model. With Google AI Studio, you can choose the model. You can use your API access. You can do all kinds of things with AI Studio. So how would you use this kind of approach for research and teaching? So you can do a semantic search over course material. So you can load all of your reading material, all of your PDFs, all your textbooks or journal articles or chapters into NotebookLM and start to ask questions about it. You can have it generate all that auto-generated content. You can have it become a personal tutor. So you can say, I want to now go deeper on chapter 3 of this textbook, and I want you to generate a lot of questions about chapter 3 that I need to focus on, and then grade how well I do and show me where I made mistakes. So you can start to have this as a personal tutor. You can make sure that your literature reviews are up to date, because you can, let's be honest, the number of publications that come out about our subject, about our research topics, is so high that it's very difficult to keep up with everything. And so we don't keep doing all the literature searches because we're just worried about what happens if it's too many. Here, you can get them all. You can take everything and include that in your literature review. And of course, you can generate code explanations as well, so you can have it go into code. So I wanted to just quickly show you an example of using this in a project. Then we can, I'll show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to take you through creating your own project. So this is a paper that we presented in January at the Higgs conference. This was the original title. It's now going into the journal Data and Policy. But this is Understanding Regional and Global Priorities for the Social Justice. I hate my long titles. I apologize. And Economic Inclusion for Persons with Disabilities, Analyzing CRPD State Reports Using Text Mining, NLP, and LLMs. So what this project has become very important for me. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about this, but you're going to see it in a couple of weeks. So for the last 12 years or so, I've taught courses on advanced text analytics using programming. So R programming, Python programming, to do natural language processing, where students can feel comfortable, and colleagues who've taken the course can feel comfortable saying, I've got access to this huge text-based data set, and I want to understand it. And so I teach how to take inductive approaches where you're exploring that data set, and deductive approaches where you can ask questions about that data set. But it's all in Python and R. And so I try to make it as painless as possible for new programmers, people who've never programmed before, as well as full-on data scientists coming into the course to get the most out of being comfortable programming in R and Python to be able to do NLP and text analytics. But the reality is everybody is not going to be comfortable programming in R and Python. And so that means that a lot of people are not going to get the benefit of having all this text-based data available, all this text available for data. And so that's a pity, right? So the sort of implied question here in this paper was, could large language models give us the same thing that some of us spent 14, 15 weeks learning how to do? Could an LLM do that for me as well? Right? And so the short answer is yes, they can. But there's a trade-off between how fast you can do these things and the explainability, because your ability to explain why the LLM selected certain things is going to differ from what you can get from a traditional NLP-based approach. But our goal was to say, could community groups who may not want to go through the process of learning how to code use an LLM to do the same kind of monitoring and evaluation of a treaty-based set of responsibilities? You kind of get where I'm going there? And so that's what we're really spending a lot of time on. So I'm just going to quickly take you through this, and then I'll show you a notebook. So the goal for us was really trying to understand how do we understand all these treaty commitments that countries have around the world. So there are more than 500 multilateral treaties. 193 countries have signed up for them. They all have obligations that countries have to meet. And so monitoring the progress of these treaties is certainly an onerous task. So it's challenging for governments, it's challenging for businesses and civil society leaders to be able to monitor that progress. And so sometimes people just let it go and they don't follow all of this data. So for us, the case study is the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And what's nice about the CRPD is it's both a human rights treaty and a development treaty. And every country that ratifies the CRPD has to produce a state report. Now, they don't just produce the state report and submit it. They have to fly a multi-stakeholder delegation to Geneva to present the state report to the Independent Expert Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That committee quizzes them and writes a response, and then they have to respond to the committee's response. So it's a detailed process. All of that generates text-based data that we can analyze. What progress did they make, and so forth. So we now have 170 of these state reports, and we had the opportunity to go through them. And so we asked 3 questions around these state reports in terms of being able to monitor progress on the CRPD and what kind of principles does it reflect and so forth. So these are 3 substantive questions and sub-questions. But then the last question was, could we do all of this with generative AI? So I'm just going to quickly show you some of what happens with traditional natural language processing, where we can do what are some of the most frequently occurring keywords, key phrases. We can explore the data set. We can do topic modeling, so we can identify key topics in the data set. We can identify named entities, which, so this is called named entity recognition. So this is a technique where you can go into a data set and you can say, show me the people, places, organizations, dates, currency, all the numbers that are used, all the acronyms. So you can take this huge data set and pull out all of the named entities, right? So we can do that. We can figure out what types of entities are represented by each, which specific entities are represented by each entity type. So you can do all these things. We can take a dictionary-based approach. So we built a dictionary or a lexicon around the CRPD for all 50 articles in the CRPD, so we can see which article across the whole data set is getting the most attention. So Article 8, followed by Article 23, Article 9, and so forth. And we know what all those articles represent. We can compare that across regions, doing a facet wrap, Chelsea. So we can say in Africa versus Asia, which articles are getting the most attention. So in Africa, it's Article 8, but in Asia, it's Article 23. So tremendous power from a text-based analytical perspective, right? This is looking at those countries that have comparing the countries that have ratified the optional protocol versus those that didn't. And then we built another dictionary using language. So the CRPD was supposed to reflect a shift away from something called the medical model to the rights-based social justice model. And so we wanted to see to what extent the text data reflected that shift, and we can see that it's the rights-based model that is most represented. So super interesting from that perspective. But then you come to this elephant in the room. So that kind of analysis takes multiple programmers, multiple researchers working on this for a significant amount of time. So could we take the same type of text data and have LLMs give us answers? So we started with the more familiar chatbots like ChatGPT. So tremendously powerful when you can upload the data. So we created a CSV file with all of those folders, all of those state reports, the text, and uploaded it. So it doesn't have the same kind of infrastructure that a RAG AI application has, but it can be tremendously powerful in answering the same kinds of questions. So it can generate the code. It is generating the code behind the scenes. You can see it if you want to do the same kind of analysis and the same kinds of visualizations. It's a little disheartening that it's becoming so powerful. But then we looked at NotebookLM. And so what NotebookLM does is it allows us to be able to load all of the state reports in, but because we're using the free version, we only have 50 documents that we can load in. So we loaded 48 documents in. We took a stratified sample across regions and country types and so forth. And then we also uploaded the CRPD text itself to reference that if we needed to. And that gave us 49 documents. And so then we asked a series, we auto-generated all that content. And then we started asking a series of questions, just like the research questions above. Could it answer, what are the most frequently occurring words? What are the most frequently occurring phrases? What are the topics? What are the named entities? And so in each case, it could give us the same kinds of answers that we needed. And so incredibly powerful tool for us to be able to take a look at. So I'm going to just show you real quickly what NotebookLM looks like. And then we'll see if you want to try to set up on your own. So this is what the NotebookLM interface looks like when you start. And this shows you some of my interests here. This is the one we're going to look at, the CRPD notebook. What was I looking at here? So the UN PRDP annual report, Project 2025, the Mueller reports, all these big documents. This is from my iTech 200 class, some of the digital concepts from the textbook. So you can decide what kind of project you want to create, but let's take a look at the CRPD analysis project. So here you see the 50 documents, the 49 documents that I talked about. So once you load them, it will generate a summary of all of those documents. You can deselect them all at the same time and just select one document. And now any prompt that you type here will only be about that selected document, which may be a 50-page report on its own, right? But remember, because NotebookLM has a 2 million token context window, it can take all of these documents at once with no problem. But if you want to look at only one of those documents, you can. So I had it auto-generate all of this content. So you can see the notes and so forth. This is certainly something that gets a lot of people, I think, excited. But it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to generate this 11-minute podcast. You probably have heard this before.
You asked, and we listened. We've really gone deep into a whole pile of national reports sent to the UN.
Yeah, quite a stack.
Our goal here to pull out the essence of how different countries are actually making the convention on the rights of persons with disabilities.
So can everybody hear that a little bit? Whoops. What happened? There we go. So when that first came out, that was mind-blowing. Two other things have happened since that time. So one is you can now generate that deep dive. So that's an 11-minute deep dive that goes into all those 50 articles. Now you can generate it in multiple languages. So you can say generate the deep dive in Spanish or French or whatever the case may be. Then the new thing that came out, and you see here, is it still says it's in beta, but this is interactive mode. So now you can interact with the podcast crew, the two people who are going back and forth about the documents. You can stop them and say, I don't think you got that quite right. You didn't consider this. And then they'll go back because they're keeping all of that in context, and they can go back and find what you just raised and bring that back into the conversation. So it's absolutely amazing. So you can do these mind maps. So you can do, you can have it automatically generate this mind map. Let me move this out of the way. And so you can see disability information sources, and you can always go back and find the source documents as well. So all this auto-generated content, is just absolutely amazing. And then again, here in the prompt, you can use the best techniques that we talked about with prompt engineering to be able to push the model. So this model now, NotebookLM started with kind of an off-brand LLM, but now I believe it uses Gemini. One of the latest Gemini models, I think, is what it's using now. So it's a really, really good model. So that's, one other thing I wanted to show you. So you can load your sources here, but a new thing that they added, they keep adding new features, is now Discover. So you can add additional sources, kind of like Perplexity, where you can say, given what you know about this project, are there any other sources you think I should include? And it can go and find those as well. So that's what I wanted to show you. And now I wanted to see if you want to set up one on your own, and we can talk through it and walk through it. But before we do that, any questions so far, any kind comments or any thoughts about what we've covered so far? A lot, I know. Somebody in chat. How do I do that? Here, let's see. Can we remove a document? Can we remove a document and add it later? Yes. Does this take up 2 documents into the memory or just 1? That's a great question. The second part of that, I'm not exactly sure. But yes, you can take it out, and you can add a new one. So I assume what it does is it takes it out of that context window, but that's an assumption. Shireen, I'm not exactly sure. But you definitely can remove a document and add another one. You can add a new YouTube video, and it'll give you the whole transcript of that video and so forth. Yes, back here. Sure. Mm-hmm. Completely. Yep. Wow. What do you mean? So learning how to build this and use it, or? Yeah, I'm sorry. I think they wanted me to bring the microphone to you, but I didn't think about it in time. So it's a great question. So I'll try to summarize real quickly. Is to what extent is this being covered in my classes and other classes, and are students getting a full picture of these kinds of approaches, or what we might consider maybe more narrow approaches that some of them were rebelling against, it seemed like in the earlier panel. So I cover as much as I can in my classes. My classes, the class that covers this is SIS and iTech 724. So it's a 700 level course. And I teach it in the fall and the spring. I have doctoral students, master's students, law students from all over campus. Faculty, Professor Horn has taken it. And so it is going to have to change, Chelsea, as a result of this. We've already started adding more. Anyway, the point is that for me, this is my class is the foundation of a lot of this, because it was already about text analytics and how you build language models and how do you build, because we build language models in the class, but a large language model is that little model that we build on steroids again. But most of the classes maybe are not covering this. I don't know. I don't even know if they're covering prompt engineering sufficiently, because that is a hugely important skill here.
If I can just make one more final observation, and I will say I'm a journalist and I'm an adjunct teaching writing, and I'm mostly interested in how the university is thinking about AI, in addition to how I might incorporate it into my class. And an observation, the language that jumped out at me that the students were using was moral and ethical language. They, in fact, used the word ethic, and they said, I don't believe in it. Students in my class called AI a sin. It's it's moral and ethical. And the words I hear you using again are helpful and control. How can I use this? How can I interact with this to help me? And how can I, dominate is too strong of a word, but how can I be in charge of it? So anyway, I'll just offer that as two very different ways of talking and thinking about AI.
Yeah, great comment. And I think, I see myself as, so even as a researcher, I'm a mixed methodologist researcher. I'm a pragmatist. I sit at the middle of valuing and respecting qualitative research and ethnography and deep understanding and spending time reading texts and so forth. I know, understand, have used, and respect that approach. I also value the epistemology that says we need to be as broad as we can. We want to measure as much as we can. So all on that side, and use statistical analysis. So I sit in the middle between both of those. So in AI, I'm the same way. I think these are incredibly powerful tools. I think there's so much that you can get out of them, but I'm not unaware of all the downsides. I'm not unaware that these models are trained on biased data and that they have been used in policing, for example, to send people only to certain areas and so forth. So I think that when Karan responded earlier about how nuanced this has to be and not just thumbs up and thumbs down, I would also say I appreciate agency, but I mean, just like we're not going to stop this from happening, and we're not going to stop it from taking some jobs, and the structural unemployment that's going to come about as a result of these tools is going to be pretty high. It's certainly not going to be every area, but anyway, I don't want to go too much into that. I'd rather focus on looking at this particular tool, but it's a challenging, because we're not even talking about the broader questions as we get into these agentic workflows. So AI is supposed to, when some of the early conversations were coming up, that it was that AI was supposed to always continue to be in service of human needs. But with these agentic approaches, you're letting the model come up with its own strategies and make its own decisions, and you're not sandboxing that, you're putting that out into the world. That's incredibly dangerous. And the kind of guardrails that are supposed to be put up. So, for me, one of the most heart-wrenching stories is of this character AI platform. Does everybody know about this character AI? So this is an AI platform that lets people, usually young people, interact with characters that they know and so forth. So there was a character from Game of Thrones called Khaleesi, I think it was. I may not be getting this right. The gray hair is really pulling me down these days. But anyway, there was a young boy who was interacting with this character AI, and he fell in love with this character and wanted to be with this character. And it's a heart-wrenching story. And the AI platform behind it never stepped in to say, this is going in the wrong direction, this conversation is dangerous. The boy started talking about wanting to harm himself and wanting to be with the character and so forth, and ultimately ended up committing suicide. And it was just, it's horrible. And so I'm not just Pollyanna-ish about all of this. These are tools, just like a typewriter, that we can use. I guess you could throw a typewriter at somebody's head and it would be a negative thing. So to me, it's just about a tool. We've got a question from Eugen here. You're welcome. Thank you. Wondering about the potential downsides of using RAG AI might be, particularly in terms of security and privacy risk, and what other trade-offs might be involved. So I tried to highlight that a little bit earlier. So when I use the public version of these tools, I only load public documents. So all those documents you saw on my notebook, including the state reports, are all publicly available. So you can go to the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and drill down into their website, and you can get all of those state reports and all those other reports, Chelsea, all of the committee responses and so forth. All of that's publicly available. So I'm completely comfortable loading those up. I'm completely comfortable loading the chapters of my textbook. I'm completely comfortable loading my folder of PDFs that I think are interesting for me to study. I'm completely comfortable uploading the Mueller reports and the the 900-page Project 2025 report. But I'm not going to load into this kind of environment sensitive data. Now, I am comfortable using a RAG AI approach on my own computer with those sensitive data. So that would be my answer, Eugen, about that particular question. All right, why don't we go through a little bit of hands-on? How many of you have some data and you have a computer that you might want to try to start something? Okay, thank you. How are you? Good to see you, thank you. So if you'll go to NotebookLM, so if you go to notebooklm.google.com, you should see an option to create your first notebook. So you should see an option that says create new. Okay. Now, if you happen to know of a folder on your computer that has some PDFs particularly work well, so if you have a folder on your computer that has a collection of PDFs, remember you can load up to 50, but the size of the PDFs doesn't really matter. So they could be 50 books, Chelsea, if you wanted to load 50 books. But certainly 50 articles would work. Now, it will tell you when you start to get to that context window, it'll say you are running out of, I forget the language it uses, but you're running out of space, essentially, in the context window. So the first thing you'll do is to create a new project. So this is what a base new project looks like. And since the RAG part of this, the retrieval part is so important, you want to build the knowledge base first. That's the core of what you're trying to do. So you can drag and drop, or you can choose the file inside your folders to upload. You can usually upload multiple at the same time. You can put in YouTube URLs. And so it's not yet doing the video that's coming down the pipe. But what it will do is it will either take the transcript or generate a transcript from that YouTube video. So all of those can become your 50 sources. So what is, you're going to see this keeps changing. So it'll take PDFs, .txt documents, Markdown. Oh, it does take audio. See, every time you come, it changes. It'll take audio files now. So it'll take MP3 files. So back to the podcast. Somebody was asking me about the podcast. You can download those podcasts as well and, you know, put them into a folder and then listen to them as you walk across campus or on your commute and so forth. So you can take Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Slides, any website link. Now this keeps changing. So any website link, YouTube link, you can paste text. So if there's something that you don't have access in another way, you can just go and copy it and paste it into and it'll become a document. So once you have your documents loaded, and those of you who are working on it, if you'll just let me know if you have your documents loaded. You got it? All right. So now let's probably go back to one of mine since I don't want to load documents there. This is probably more reflective of, well, let's see, Chelsea, I have one here that you might like. Right here. This is the comments on the cybersecurity framework. So this has all 50 documents that might be like yours. So one of the first things that you can do is auto-generate the content. So you can say, generate a study guide. You can generate an FAQ, generate a briefing doc, or generate a timeline. Now, each time you click on that, it'll start working, but you don't have to stop there. You can keep moving on to the next thing. So one of the things that everybody probably wants to do is to generate your audio conversation. And that'll take about 10 minutes, but you can do that. So mine just says load. So before I forget this thought, so one of the things that you might want to do, like I just had it load a previously generated podcast. What you might want to do every so often, because the models keep changing, is download that version and then delete it and have it generate a new model, a new podcast using the new model. So yes.
Any of these buttons on the right, they're only referred to that one document that you've highlighted now, or is it a combination of all of them?
Okay, so the question was, when you click on any of these auto-generated tools, is it based on only the document that's highlighted, if one was highlighted? So here you see that all the sources are selected. So the study guide is going to be for all of those sections. But if you wanted to generate a study guide only for this report, you would deselect everything. Let me show you how to do that. So you would deselect everything, then only select that one. And then now everything that you either prompt or have it generate will be only about that document. Yep. So you can make decisions about how you wanted to use the tool based on that, what you select and what not. You can select 3, 5, 10 out of the 50, 48 out of the 50. It's up to you. Okay, so let's listen to this podcast and see.
Your personalized deep dive. AI risk management is our topic for today.
Oh, yeah. It's a big one.
You said it. We've got a pretty impressive stack of research here.
Looks like it.
Government reports, responses to NIST about their AI framework, even some academic papers.
Wow.
Clearly. Welcome to your personalized deep dive. AI risk management is our topic for today. Oh, wait. Someone wants to join.
Yes, I'd like to come in here. What does this set of reports say about cybersecurity?
Oh, it's fantastic to have you jump in.
We're so glad you're here with us.
You're asking about the reports we've been looking at.
Yes, these are responses to a request from NIST.
That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
They were asking for input on creating a framework.
A framework for managing risks related to artificial intelligence.
And cyber. Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
So I'm still asking you to focus on cybersecurity, that part of the framework that you're analyzing.
Absolutely. We can definitely keep our focus there for you.
Cybersecurity is a critical lens through which to view AI risk.
You know, a lot of the organizations responding to this really emphasized it.
They see it.
I just have so much fun with this. So the deep dive aspect is kind of, well, it's overwhelming in a lot of ways, but think about what it's doing. It's taking those 50 documents and it is generating a fairly thorough review of what those documents mean. And then if there's, remember I kept saying that you have to keep pushing back on the LLM? So if it's something that you want and it's not giving it to you, just like I interrupted and said, I don't want to hear that right now. I want to focus on the cybersecurity aspects of it. You can push it to only look at those aspects. And you can get more and more and more specific about what you want it to do. Let's see, there's another question here. If we use these techniques in a published article, how should we cite our use of NotebookLM and its role? So I think, Karen, some of that is still being developed. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, in Cogburn we have this, for student work, an AI disclosure form. And so I think somewhere in your acknowledgments or somewhere in the article itself, in the manuscript, you should talk about your use of these tools. In my case, it's very explicit, so it's in the right in the text of the article itself. But if that wasn't the focus, and your focus was on something else, then you want to find some way to disclose that. But I think the standards are a little bit in flux and probably differ from field to field. Thank you, bless you. Eugene said, I've just tried using a public document. I can immediately see how powerful and helpful this can be for teaching and research. Thank you for introducing the source. You are more than welcome. Happy to do that. So those of you who loaded a set of set of files, did you click on any of the auto-generated content? Yep. Was it helpful? Do you know the subject matter pretty well, or? Yes. Yes, it's been sitting there.
And it's interesting because like it's not a very curated. I have two main different topic of research, and that's all mixed. And it's interesting to kind of see it struggling to find the common thread between the two.
Right, but
yeah.
So the fellow who went to Google to develop this, that was exactly what he wanted it to do, was to look at somewhat disparate pieces that he had written and to help him find the connections between them for the next, article or book that he wanted to work on. So that was sort of what it was for, is to really struggle with trying to find those disparate connections, if any, between sources.
It is interesting because, for instance, the title that I did generate the briefing doc, and it came up with a title that it's true. It covered these both fields of research, even though they're very different from each other. And I can see myself using that quite a bit, mainly to organize literature, like if I write an introduction or things like that.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Really, really exciting. Anybody else come up with something? Chelsea, anything on your front? Sure. So what I wanted you to be able to do was to, let you see what the user interface looked like, how to set up a new notebook, how to add multimodal sources. So maybe we should do a YouTube video if we have time. I don't know. I think I was supposed to finish at 12, but we got started a little bit late. This finding additional sources, that's new, and that is really cool. And so since I have some space on this one, why don't we try that and say discover. What are you looking at my stuff? Okay, let's hit discover. Okay, another question says, can we use... Oh, my wife is here. Thank you. Sorry, she has to go to another meeting. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I was particularly struck by the first session when students were feeling a sense of psychological dependency with the AI tools and feeling like they didn't know enough to challenge it. Yeah, that's definitely true. And I challenge it a lot, Hannah. Was this Hannah? because I can tell when it's wrong. That's true. Wow. That's a good question there. Okay, can we use material from Wikipedia without selecting specific files? Yes, you can put the URL in, Alexandra, and it should bring that in. Henry says, how can we know if the information generated is correct? I think that's related to the same question, Henry. Anything can validate it, or we just need to refer to the source to compare. So Henry, what I like about this particular tool is that it makes it easy to get back to the source. So if you look here with this summary, for example, let me go back to my other one. So in this summary, for example, you can always just click on this, and it takes you right back to where. So in text analytics, this would be called something like keyword in context, which we call quick, where you go back to the source document, and you can read that section to see if that really makes sense, in context, using context differently than we did earlier. So Henry, I think that's the best way. There are no metrics or anything like that to get generated that you can just refer to, unfortunately. But you can go back and check the source documents pretty easily. So going back to your comment earlier about the students, so one of the things that I was thinking about, we have another big project on looking at the SDGs, and particularly looking at SDG 6.5.1 on water policy. And we presented last week virtually in Korea about this, and we presented this hybrid approach, both the NLP-based approach and the LLM-based approach. And some of the other participants on the panel presented only the LLM-based approaches. And this was something that we ran into, which was saying, okay, for us to do some of what we want to do with the NLP-based approaches, it will take us 5 months, 6 months, to sort of build the dictionary and get the data ready and so forth and so on. Whereas the LLM, you could do it this afternoon, right? But you can't explain it necessarily. There are no metrics to use and so forth and so on. You can go back and check. So there are metrics to use about these LLMs, like how frequently they hallucinate and so forth and so on. But if you're faced with that, what do you do? So it was interesting that the conversation came out that given that you can generate these so quickly, let's say it's 80% right, not 100% right. Let's say it's 80% right, but you did that in 3 minutes as opposed to 3 months. For a certain use cases, that 80% accuracy is going to be super, right? So our hybrid approach that we personally use is to take both approaches, but recognizing that this is going to be so much faster. Yeah. Other questions? Anna, how are we doing? Okay, can I talk about issues of uploading published scholarly work with copyright infringement? Is there some tool in Notebook to alert about this or prevent it? So I don't think that this is just me personally, Rita, I don't think there's any limitation with using published work in this context. This is sort of like you loading your PDFs and taking notes on them, essentially, because at least according to Google, which I don't trust very much, but nothing leaves the notebook. They have been emphatic about this, is that nothing leaves a notebook. So it's not going to fine-tune or train any other models. It's only for use in the notebook. So that's all I would be able to say about that. I don't think that it would be violation of any published copyright infringement for loading it in for your own personal work. Oh, that's interesting, Hannah. I'll take a look at that. Thank you. I'm going to click on it so I can open it up. But because of the hallucinations, it's one of the things that I like about the RAG AI approach is that you've got this ground truth, that you're using. And so because in the CRPD notebook that I have here, I can say deselect all the sources and only select the CRPD if I want to. So now I'm just looking just at the treaty itself, and I can then say refer to this document on a subsequent prompt if I wanted to as well. All right, so I think we've covered everything, how to find additional sources, source selection overview, the audio overview, how to auto-generate the timeline, the mind map, how to submit your own prompts. Oh, how to use sample prompts. Those last two things I'll say real quickly then. So this is where you put your own prompts, which is right here. And this is where I was saying earlier where you want to be aggressive at pushing and pushing and pushing. But it also has these recommended prompts. So based on what it knows in its 2 million token context window, these are questions or prompts that it thinks you should be asking, based on that. So what are the types of information collected? What methods measure disability prevalence? That's a great question that it'd be great to see the answer to. So let's do this, for example. So if we click that sample prompt, so now it's going back through all of these reports, looking at how these reports have covered how they measure disability prevalence. It's thinking about it now, thinking again. I hate anthropomorphizing this, but it's coming up with its predicted outcome. Sounds worse than thinking, but it's more accurate, right? So it's going through all these reports, and it's going to tell us what methods are used to measure disability prevalence. So once that comes up, you can save that as a note. And this is kind of important for those of you who are kind of going down this road. Don't do something really interesting and not save it, because it's ephemeral, it'll go away. But if it's something this is taking an awful long time, because it normally doesn't take that long to do anything. Once it creates something interesting for you, okay, good, let's read it now. So once it creates something interesting for you, you want to save that as a note. So it went through and it says, based on the provided sources in our conversation history, which is now called the what? Context window, right? Various methods are employed to measure disability prevalence. Henry, if you look here, so it's going, these are the places you can find where it's drawing that from out of the data sources. So it uses national censuses. Wow. Chelsea, so this is let me tell you a little secret. So we proposed a side event for the upcoming UN Conference of States Parties in June at the UN. For all the countries in the world that have ratified the CRPD will be there. Chelsea's going to come with us, which is so exciting. So our side event is exactly what we've been talking about. And we have 4 major data sources that we're looking at to map disability rights progress. So the state reports is one. The census data is another. The mapping data, so there's a lot of crowd-based mapping data where people are going out to restaurants and buildings and so forth and mapping the accessibility. So we got 4 sources, but we just clicked on this sample prompt, and the first one that it says are the national censuses. And that's data that we thought was not being used sufficiently. But this is telling us that Albania, Afghanistan, Bolivia, Chile, Mozambique, and Pakistan, as some examples, are all using those. And we can click on any of these links and go back to those reports, and it'll show us where in those reports that they're using that to measure disability prevalence. So that's pretty exciting. But again, you want to then save this as a note. Specific methodologies here. Right here. You see this button right here? So don't forget, save as a note. Once you save it as a note, it'll go to your long list of things that you've saved right here. And all of that can be exported as well if you want to. Okay, I think we are done. I see 2 more questions in the chat. I believe they're going to share the recording. Yes, they said they're going to upload it. I think that's it, Anna. Any last minute burning questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. You mean these numbers here? I'm not sure if that means these numbers. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.